Let us see the next mantra, mantra number 9. Hiranmaye pare koshe, Hiranmaye pare koshe, Virajam brahma nishkalam, Virajam brahma nishkalam, Tatshubhram jyotisham jyotihi, Tatshubhram jyotisham jyotihi, Tadyat atmavido viduhu, Tadyat atmavido viduhu. Hiranmaye pare koshe virajam brahma nishkalam, Hiranmaye pare koshe virajam brahma nishkalam, Tatshubhram jyotisham jyotihi, Tadyat atmavido viduhu, Tatshubhram jyotisham jyotihi, Tadyat atmavido viduhu. What was said in mantra number 8? Vidyate hridaya grandhi chidyante sarva samshayaha kshiyante chasya karmani tasmin drashte paravare. That what was said earlier, the same meaning in nutshell or from a different perspective is talked again and again in few mantras hereafter. This is one of them. Shankaracharya says, Uktasya eva arthasya sankshepa abhidayakaha uttare mantraha. Same meaning is revealed by the next few mantras. And this mantra says, Hiranmaye pare koshe. Hiranmaye pare koshe. Pare koshe. Kosha means covering. Pare, in the most interior, or you can say they translate supreme kosha. It is wrong thing. Para is sarvabhyantaraha. And Hiranmaye, it's in the sense of that which is effulgent, that which is of the nature of light. Hiranmaye, pare Hiranmaye means Jyotirmaye, pare Sarvantarmaye koshe. That most interior koshaha, covering, which is Sarvantar, which is the most interior and which is of the nature of effulgence, light. Virajam nishkalam brahma. That Brahman which is free from any blemish. Rajas means free from any impurities. Nishkalam, kala means parts, forms. That Brahman which is nishkalam, formless, and which is ever pure, is there, available there, seated there as though. And that Brahman is Shubhram, is purest. And Jyotisham Jyotihi, it is the light of the light. Light of the light in a sense, illuminator of the illuminator. Tadyat, that Brahman, Tad Brahman, Yat, that Brahman which Atmavidaha Viduhu, those who know the self. Knower of the self know this Brahman seated in the heart means themselves. This mantra itself is a Mahavakya which reveals the identity between individual and the total. That Brahman which is Jagat Karanam Brahman. What was said earlier, Yathorna Nabi Srujate Grunnachecha Yatha Prithivyaam Oshadaya Sambhavanti Yatha Satah Purushat Keshalomani Tatha Aksharat Sambhavati Vishwam. From that Akshara, this Vishwa has come. In the later part of the mantras, Akshara was referred as Brahman. So that Brahman which is Jagat Karanam is located in Hiranmaya Pare Koshe. Is as though available there, and therefore, and that Brahman is of Nishkalam and then Virajam and Shubhram And Jyotisham Jyotihi, that is known to these wise people, the people who are knower of the self, they know it as myself. Atmavidaha. So they know Brahman as Atman. They know Brahman as the self. Let's go little reverse. Hiranmaye pare koshe. In Shastra, when the word koshaha is used, means it is used in the sense of covering. Kosha means that which covers. Like the standard example they give, the scabbard covers the sword. Scabbard is called kosha, that which covers. Now, there are, they say, 5 koshas in terms of Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, Anandamaya. These words, we have to see their meaning, not the direct meaning, but the implied meaning. You have to take it a laksharth. It is not really kosha. It is not that Atma is covered. Like even they say in Sanskrit, the scabbard is called ashraya. And the sword is ashritaha, that which is support, inside. Now, if they were really koshas, then Brahman becomes very tiny thing. Because 5 things are covering. There are 5 sheets on it. Then and that too, it is so small inside one body. Each body has koshas, and Brahman is into these 5. Each body it becomes like a cell, dry cell, which keeps the body going. No. Ashraya, ashrita sthanam is not the case. Why it is said koshaha? That I sense becomes kosha. Then ગુજરાતી હું વિશેની જેટલી માન્યતાઓ છે એ હુના કોશ. What I take I to be, that my subjective perception about the I is kosha. It as though covers. When a thing is covered, you don't see it in spite of it being there. Sword is there, but you don't see it. Similarly, it becomes a kosha because you don't see it in spite of it is there. Like even 2 examples I can give you. During the day, all the stars are there in the sky. We see the sky which is devoid of any stars. That's not true. They are there. But the light of the sun is so much glowing. The sun is illuminating. The illumination of the sun is such that you don't see beyond that illumination where the stars are there. Some of the stars may be much, much bigger than the sun, larger in size, and maybe more illuminating than the sun, but still you don't see them. And they may be bigger, and so many bigger, the whole Milky Way. There are millions and millions of the stars there. They are like sun, illuminating. But then all of them get covered by sunlight or the sun, which sun literally cannot cover. In terms of size, in terms of illumination, sun is not as big as to cover all the stars. But still, sun becomes kosha iva kosha. Sun is as though covering of all the stars. Because your vision gets covered by the light of the sun. Not covered, is overpowered by the light of the sun, whereby you don't see beyond that. Another example we have in Gujarati, in fact we studied a poem in the school. Tarna othe dungar, dungar koi dekhe nahi. The mountain is behind just a blade of a grass. And nobody sees the mountain. How can a blade of grass can cover the mountain? It is exactly like my little finger can cover the entire world. If I put my little finger right in front of my eyes, I don't see the whole world. Little finger has a capacity to cover the entire world, which is as though covering. It doesn't cover literally. Little finger has no strength. It's not big enough. But it covers my vision. Similarly, my vision of the self gets clouded. Little finger clouds my vision. My vision of the self gets clouded. In other words, I take self to be something other than what it is, for whatever reason. And that, what is taken to be self, which is not really the self, is called as koshaha. So, koshaha iva kosha. In a Shastric jargon we say, the viprita buddhi, the misapprehensions of the self is kosha. Here, in our example, the light of the sun, effulgence of the sun is so bright that I don't see beyond it. Here somehow I take myself to be physio-psycho-complex. My birthday, I may die, I'm getting old, etc. That means I is placed in a body, gross body, which is not I. I am the knower of the body. I know my body. I see my body. I objectify my body. And what is objectified cannot be the subject. I am not the subject. Body is not the subject. When I say I am male or female, this is my birthday, etc. I am Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, etc. That is identification with the body. And that becomes Annamaya Koshaha. I am thirsty, hungry, etc. That's identification with Pranamaya Kosha, Prana. I am angry, I am jealous, I am happy, I am unhappy. I am agitated, I am compassionate. These all I gets identified with the emotions. I am angry. There is no space between emotion and I. And when the I is identified with given emotion, then it becomes Manomaya Kosha. Then is I know this. I am the doer. I did it. Kartrutvam, Gnatritvam. I am an engineer. I am a doctor. That is identification with Buddhi, Vijnanamaya Kosha. I am happy. The Bhoktritvam is Anandamaya Kosha. So, these 5 koshas, as though clouds me, clouds the self. That which self? The self that is Brahman. The self which is limitless, Satyam Gnanam Anantam Brahma. It cannot be covered, It is not limited. It is Desha Kala Vastu Aparichinna. Paricheda Shunya. There are no limitations of time, space and objectivity in Atma. but it as though creates, like the dress or a role of a beggar, as though covers the actor. Actor somehow takes himself to be the beggar. That role identifies. So they are called koshaha. Coverings. Koshaha iva kosha. And where exactly it is there? Though there are 5 koshas, fivefold identification, therefore fivefold covering, figuratively. But then, Hiranmaya pare kosha. Pare kosha means anandamaya. The paraha is not limitless kosha. Brahman is limitless, so what covers Brahman is also limitless. There cannot be two limitless things. One limitless covered by another limitless. Mathematically it's not possible. Paraha is the most interior. An interiorness. I don't know what's the word for interiorness. The sense of being interior is with reference to subtlety. That which is most subtle. Kosha. Most interior kosha. Why do you say most interior kosha? Because that in two sense it is said interior. It is subtlest and more pervasive and more closer to Atma. What is that kosha? Hiranmaya kosha. That Hiranmaya. In Shastra, the word Hiranyam Shabda is used. Even Shivji, Hiranyaya Namaha, Hiranyalingaya Namaha, Suvarnaya Namaha, Suvarnalingaya Namaha. Suvarnam is only metal which doesn't lose its shine. Oxidation doesn't take place. To all other metals are subject to weather impact. Gold is almost not affected. It remains shining as it is all the time. There is some dust that comes on it, but you clean it up, it starts shining. So Hiranyam implies a shine. It is not Brahman is shining. Shining means illumination, light. And whenever the light is used in Shastra, in other words, when Hiranyam Shabda is used in Shastra, it means effulgence, self-effulgent, self-revealing, self-existing. It is to convey that Brahman is self-effulgent, of the nature of light, means self-revealing. Means Gnana Swarupaha. It is Gnapti Swarupaha. Hiranmaye means Jyotirmaye. Hiranyam means Jyoti. Even Jyoti also means Prakashmaya. Don't think literally frame. Jyotirmaya. The Jyoti Shabda in Gujarati is used for male and female both. There is a Jyoti Ben, a woman called Jyoti, and there is a person, man called Jyoti. Incidentally, I had a student when I was teaching in Ahmedabad long ago, 30 years ago, I was taking classes regularly here. I had a couple attending to my classes. I asked him his name. He said, "What's your name?" He said, "Jyoti." And I asked her, "What is your name?" She says, "My name is also Jyoti." I have met with Mr. Jyoti in our great Congress, BJP, now BJP leader from Madhya Pradesh, Jyotiraditya, Aditya means sun, Jyoti, Prakash Aditya, light, brilliant sun with tremendous brilliance. So it implies him. The name means which is bright sun. I have met women having a name as Jyoti, but never met a couple, Mr. Jyoti and Mrs. Jyoti. I wonder how she must be writing her name. Mrs. Jyoti, Jyoti Shukla. She must be writing. They were Shuklas, I guess. Anyway, whatever it is. So, Hiranmaya means Prakashmaya. Hiranyam means which is self-effulgent, which is of the nature of eternal light, imperishable light. The shine of the gold doesn't perish. Similarly, this shine or the light of the consciousness is imperishable, means Satchit Swarupaha. Hiranmaya Kosha. Hiranyam means Chiti. Chit Swarupaha, of the nature of consciousness, self-revealing consciousness. That consciousness which doesn't require any external agency to reveal itself. It doesn't require any aid of any instruments, means of knowledge, eyes, ears, nose, etc. It reveals itself by itself. Aham asmi, I am, is self-revealing, self-existing fact. You don't require eyes or ears to say that I am there or not. Puja Swamiji often used to say, some French philosopher had written, I think, therefore I am. He says, no, whether you think or not, I am. And there are so many non-thinking fellows, but their I is still there. I is. It is self-revealing I. That's why they say Jyoti, light. Light means self-revealing, self-existing self. Okay. And then it is koshaha, covered. This is a very peculiar covering. It is not little finger covering the self. They're like little finger covering. And there are two things, little finger and the eyes. Or it is not the blade of the grass covering the mountain. Drashti patham avarodaya. It obstructs my vision of seeing. But that's not the case here. Here, the self as though becomes that. It is not two things here, but then the viparita gnanam about the self, the erroneous knowledge of the self, that itself is a kosha, that is a covering as though. Meaning thereby, that self-revealing, self-existing self somehow takes itself to be Annamaya, Pranamaya, Vijnanmaya, alone. That becomes koshaha. Okay? So, all viparita bhavana is kosha. That viparita bhavana, that I with viparita bhavana, that erroneous I, is never ever away from the real I. But the real I is distinct from that erroneous I. Please understand this. The erroneous identity is never away from the real fellow. But the real fellow has nothing to do with that. It is untouched by it. Actor taking himself to be really a beggar, though he is a multi-millionaire person, very rich person, so that erroneous identity, even though rich but to take myself as a poor, that erroneous identity is never away from the real I, the actor. Because it is a very substratum, satta spurti pradata, without which that fellow cannot exist. But at the same time, the real I has nothing to do with that. That's an imposter I. So koshas are imposter. Koshas are superimposed eyes on the real I. So Hiranmaya pare kosha. That's why it is called ultimate kosha. You know? And here it is kosha. There he says, Hiranmaye pare koshe sthitau. Hiranmaye pare. Grammatically, this is Saptami Vibhakti, seventh case. Saptami is locative. Kutra nivasati? Where do you live? This fellow may say, Asmin grame nivasami. I live in this village or this town. That's a locative. It indicates location. Does it mean that Hiranmaya Pare Koshe Brahma Nishkalam lives, Nishkalam Brahma lives there? Or Nishkalam Brahma abides there? That means these koshas become ashraya for Nishkalam Brahma. Not one, but 5 ashrayas. And here teacher only talks about Pare Koshe, the ultimate kosha, innermost kosha. That is called Anandamaya Koshe. In Anandamaya Koshe, no, this is not possible. Why? Brahman provides Adhara to everything. How can you provide Adhara to Brahman? It is like the space accommodates everything. It's a substratum for everything. Everything abides in the space. Still we use pot space. You know, this pot space, 5 liter space. We use this as though the space abides in that pot. As though that space abides in that vessel. It is not abiding. It is not location. It is called Upalabdhi Sthanam. It is a place, as though place, sthanam. Sthana iva sthanaha, where the knowledge of Brahman takes place. Okay? So, what is the sthanam? He says, Hiranmaye pare kosha. Hiranmaya means Gnanamaya kosha. And here, primarily it means is Anandamaya kosha. Anandamaya, means what? This Anandamaya represents different vrittis of the mind, Priya, Moda, Pramoda, different modifications of the mind, which represents different degrees of happiness, different levels of happiness. And when that experience of happiness takes place, let's use this word experience. In those moments of experience of happiness, what happens? When I am experiencing happiness, I am very close to Atma. Because Atma is Ananda Swarupa. That experience may have degrees and vrittis may have modification in terms of little joy, and then you can say more joy and ecstatic, etc. These are 3 degrees of happiness. You can say one gains 3 levels or quantities. These 3, when one gains, one is closest to Atma, because Atma is Ananda Swarupa. And one is enjoying that, or one is identified with that happiness. At that moment, all modifications, all vikaras of the mind stops. There is a shanta vritti. And therefore Anandamaya kosha is shantam also. So shanti and sukham, peace and happiness become synonym. They are synonym. And that is why in Shastra, that this Anandamaya is used to point out the self in Anandamaya Kosha because it is closest, it is most interior. It is there you recognize the self. Yes, I am Ananda. It is Kosha because the Ananda seems that Ananda comes from something outside me, other than me, makes me happy. But it is I who is the Ananda Swarupa that is discovered where? In that Kosha is Anandamaya Kosha. And that Anandamaya Kosha, the knowledge of Brahman takes place. Okay? Means Brahman is not located in Buddhi, which is Anandamaya Kosha. Bhokta. Karta is Vijnanamaya. And Bhokta is Anandamaya. Brahman is not located in the Buddhi, but then a particular form of vritti, Buddhi, takes place by which you recognize yourself as Ananda. Therefore it is called Hiranmaya. Therefore Shastra uses Buddhi and it is said Hiranmaya Pare Kosha. Pare means ultimate Kosha. Ultimate means there is nothing subtler than that. There is nothing more interior than that. There Brahman is recognized. Okay? What is recognition of Brahma? Pramanajanya vritti. When the means of knowledge, proper means of self-knowledge, when they are employed, and by then that implication before a means of knowledge, Pramanajanya is there. I mean, Pramana can give rise to knowledge, but Pramana needs to be handled. Guru Ukta Pramanajanya Vritti Vishesha. So there Guru comes in and then Shraddha also gets into it, necessary. When these things are there and the Vritti takes place, that it is there. And that Vritti having taken place, the person discovers what? Virajam Brahma, Nishkalam Brahma, Jyotisham Jyotihi Brahma, and Shubhram Brahman is discovered. That Brahman, Atma Vido Viduhu. When the knower of the self know that Brahman to be themselves, and that is why it is Kosha, Upaladhisthanatva. And little more we have to look into it. We shall look into it next week. Yesterday, because of some reasons, I couldn't complete the class. I hope today it will give you some more clarity about the last verse and this verse. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadhaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. We'll see you next week. Namaste.